Is this in the right spot? Because I moved it. All right. Hello, my name is Jonathan Bean, and I'm a clinical application specialist with Hamilton Medical, and this is the HAMILTON-T1 transport ventilator. It's on a trolley right now. I'm going to first show you how to remove it from the trolley and replace. Underneath, there's a knob. Just turn the knob, pull it forward, and it comes off the trolley. To replace it on the trolley, I line up these two pegs in the back, push it back just a little bit, and tighten the knob underneath. At the back of the ventilator, you'll see an intake. This is the intake for the turbine with a maximum output of 260 liters per minute. Inside this cover is a HEPA filter, and this here is a gross dust filter that needs to be checked regularly. On the left side of the ventilator, you'll see another intake. This is for the cooling fan for the internal parts of the ventilator. Also make sure that remains clean and dust-free. Here's a USB port. This is for placing a thumb drive where you can download screenshots and upload software and things like that. And then here is the oxygen connection for a 50 psi oxygen tank or from the wall. This is below that is the oxygen bleed in for bleeding in oxygen up to 15 liters per minute. Down here, this is a connection for a DC battery. On the right side of the ventilator, you'll see some ports across the top. We have end-tidal CO2, SpO2, and nurse call connection. Below that, you'll see a yellow connector. That is for the nebulizer. It has an internal nebulizer. Here are the connections for the flow sensor, which we'll come back and show you how to attach that a little bit later. This is the inspiratory port, and this is the expiratory port. This is the speaker for the alarm. To check the expiratory valve, just give it a turn counterclockwise, and it pops right out. It has a diaphragm and a plastic housing. Make sure the diaphragm is aligned and smooth around the edges. To replace it, pop it in, give it a turn clockwise. Okay. On the front of the ventilator, this right here is the on-off switch. So I'm just going to depress that switch and the ventilator is going to boot up. While it's booting up, I'll show you how to attach the circuit. Step out of the screen. This is the Hamilton transport circuit. It's a coaxial circuit. The inspiratory limb is actually on the inside of the expiratory limb. We always want to attach it with the circuit pointing towards the front of the ventilator so that the limbs aren't reversed. Just press it on there nice and tight. These are the flow sensor connections. It's color coded, blue to blue, and no color to no color. And now I'm going to attach the end-tidal CO2 cable. Notice it also is color coded. Okay. Now the front of the ventilator, at the lower part, is a battery compartment. There's two batteries. This is battery number 1, it's fixed. Battery number 2 is hot swappable. I simply slide the lever to the side, remove the battery. I can replace it with a fresh battery. Reinsert, close the lever, and shut the door. With both batteries fully charged, you get approximately 9 hours battery life. On the top of the ventilator, you'll see an alarm lamp, visible 360. And then over here, you'll see the soft keys. This is the on-off and the standby button. To take the ventilator out of standby, I can push that button once. To replace it into standby, press the button again. It's a two-step process. Activate standby. Next button down is the screen dimmer. To the right of that is the screen lock button. If I depress that button, the touch screen is locked out. To unlock the touch screen, hit the button again. Below there, it says up oxygen. That is the oxygen enrichment key. If I depress that key, it's going to give 100% oxygen for 2 minutes. Next to that, This button looks like a little set of lungs. This is the manual inspiration or the inspiratory hold button. Below that is a button with it looks like a picture of a printer on there. That is the screenshot button. So once I've put a thumb drive in the USB port, this becomes like a shutter button. Every time I push that button, it takes a picture of the screen. To the right of that is the nebulizer button. The ventilator does have an internal nebulizer. I can depress that button. It's going to run the nebulizer for 30 minutes and turn itself off. And below that is this alarm silence button. I push that, it's going to silence the alarms for 2 minutes. To deactivate the button, just press again. And this is the push and turn knob here. On the touch screen, you can see to make a change, I would highlight a control, make it yellow, turn the push and turn knob, and then depress the knob to confirm, or simply touch the control again to confirm. Also, notice it's in a bit of a tab system. To open the controls, I press the controls tab. To open a different window, I press, for example, the alarms tab, and it opens a different window. So to navigate between windows, I just hit different tabs, or to close a tab, I can touch the X in the lower left corner. Here on the main part of the screen, you can see that we are in standby. There's the standby timer right there. And for a new patient, the screen looks like this. There's 3 quick start settings. You can put in your own modes for a quick setup that is customizable. Below that, in this section, is patient information. So this is where you're going to put in the patient gender and the patient height, and the ventilator will automatically calculate the ideal body weight in kilograms. And just below that, there's a tab for the pre-op check. So let's go through the pre-op check. We have to calibrate the flow sensor and do a tightness check. So I touch that tab, it opens the systems window, and here are the pre-op check tests. The first one is called tightness, and I'm going to put on my gloves. So let's do the pre-op check. You'll see 3 tests. The first is the tightness check. Press that button. On the screen, it's going to give you directions as to what to do next. Now it says tighten patient system, so I'll take my gloved hand and occlude the circuit. Now it's going to pressurize up to 60 centimeters of water pressure and look for leaks. And I'm going to watch the screen to tell me what to do next. Connect patient just means that test is finished. So now we can move on to the next test. It's called flow sensor. I depress that, and it tells me again what to do. It says disconnect patient. Now it says turn the flow sensor. So this is where I need my flow sensor adapter. Place it on the end of the flow sensor. Reverse the flow sensor in the circuit. And the ventilator will sense when I've reversed it, and we'll continue with the test. And so again, you need to watch the screen because it's going to tell you what to do next. Maneuver in progress. Now it tells me to turn the flow sensor, so I'm going to reverse the flow sensor. I'm not going to remove the adapter because it's no longer needed. Watching the screen, you can see it's going to go through the maneuver again. Okay, the test has been completed. We can confirm with a green check mark and the time and date stamp on both of those tests. The next test is called O2 cell. We don't need to do that unless the ventilator gives us a message up here in the message bar that we need to calibrate the O2 cell. So now let's perform the end-tidal CO2 sensor calibration. Press here on the screen, attach your cuvette. The test must be performed on room air. And again, I'm going to pay attention to the screen. Okay, now we've performed all the pre-op checks. All right, on the standby screen, there's 3 tabs at the top. First is to place the ventilator in neonatal mode. The second is adult pediatrics. So this is adult and pediatrics down to 3 kilograms. And then the last patient tab just brings up the settings from the last time I used the ventilator. Okay, and going back to the adult pediatric, this is the screen you'll see when the ventilator starts up. There's 3 quick start tabs here. Those can be set up as custom modes for emergency situations, such as if you just want to go into pressure control very quickly and not have to go through all the settings. Right here. And then below that is the selection for patient gender and height. So in this case, we're going to select a female patient, and we're going to adjust the height to 72 inches. And you can see the ventilator has calculated the ideal body weight for you. If you would like to change modes before you start the ventilator, just select the Modes tab. Here's all the modes available on the Hamilton-T1. At the top, we have Adaptive Pressure Ventilation CMV and Adaptive Pressure Ventilation SIMV. Those are your volume modes. The next section down are your pressure modes. We have Pressure Control Ventilation Plus, Pressure SIMV, Spontaneous, and two forms of bilevel called Dual PAP and APRV. Below that is a mode called ASV, which is Adaptive Support Ventilation. That's a mode that's unique to Hamilton Medical ventilators. It's a closed loop mode of ventilation. Below that is another section for non-invasive modes. We have NIV, NIV-ST, that's with a backup rate, and we have high flow oxygen. Also in our pressure control mode, we have speak valve. You can see I'm in pressure control mode now. If I open the controls window, activate speak valve like this. Activate on and then confirm. We're not going to use that mode right now, so I'm just going to X that out. We're still in pressure control ventilation, and I can start the ventilator. I have a demo lung here. Start ventilation. Okay, on the touchscreen you can see it's divided up into different sections. On the left side we see the patient monitored parameters, the four main monitored parameters. These are customizable. We can put whatever values up there we like. Then in the center we have the graphics, and then on the right side we have the current mode and current settings. At the top, this is the message bar where you'll see alarm messages and technical messages, things like that. The red information tab here is so that we can view the recently activated alarms. If I touch that tab, you can see these are alarms that I activated earlier, and I can reset that, clear those alarms, close with the X, and the red tab disappears. There again is the Modes tab. Here's my current mode. You can see it. We are also in adult pediatric mode, and we have our pressure control, PEEP, FiO2. To see all the controls, touch the Controls tab, and all the controls are available here. There's two tabs in the controls. We have the basic settings and the secondary settings. And below that, there's a patient tab where we can adjust the patient information if we decide that we had it in incorrectly, or we just want to double check the patient size and make sure we have the right ideal body weight on the ventilator. The tab below that is the Alarms tab. Here we find all the alarms. There's two sections, limits number 1, limits number 2. Number 2 is where you'll find your end-tidal CO2 alarm and your SpO2 alarm. To adjust the alarms, activate, in this case, the lower alarm setting, adjust, and confirm. Here on the right side of the alarms window is the buffer window. This is the same window we saw when we hit the red information tab, and it shows our recent alarms. Let's close that. Below there is your battery indicator, so you can see battery number 1 and battery number 2. Battery number 2 is partially depleted, you can see, because it's turning yellow from the top. So the more depleted the battery, the lower the yellow goes on the indicator. And you can see battery number 1 is fully charged. We can also see that the ventilator is not plugged in because we see a red X through the AC plug. If I were to plug in the ventilator, that red X would disappear. Okay, coming across the bottom, System tab. We can see various information such as the serial number, the O2 consumption in liters per minute, little bits of information like that. Next tab over is, now we're back to that test and calibration window that we saw earlier. Sensors on off. If I were to want to deactivate a certain sensor, such as the end-tidal CO2, I just tap the box and it's deactivated. Next tab over is settings. This is where I find the alarm loudness adjustment. The range is 1 to 10, 10 being the loudest, 1 being the most quiet. And it has a test button below where I can test the alarm. On the left side, we have a day-night tab where I can adjust the screen brightness, or I can set it to automatic where it adjusts to ambient light. Below that, we have a date and time setting where I can adjust the date and time settings on the ventilator. Okay, let's close that window. Next tab over is your event log. So it's going to save the last 1,000 events available to you. To scroll back, it's in chronological order. Just activate the scroll bar, turn the knob, and you can go back. You can see all the ventilator changes and recent alarms up to 1,000 events. Again, and then here's the Tools tab. This is where you'd configure the ventilator from HPO or high pressure oxygen, or LPO for low pressure oxygen, or you can reach the configuration menu to adjust the graphics or monitor parameters that are displayed, things like that. And then let's close that window and let's come over to the monitoring tab. So we have 3 different tabs in monitoring. So the ventilator can monitor over 50 different values. Let's close that window. And then now in the center of the screen, you can see the graphics. So the pressure waveform is always there. That can't be changed. But the bottom of the graphics area is configurable. Now you can see we have a flow waveform. Okay, let's change that. We'll tap the screen. We'll come over to graphics. The first graphic available is the dynamic lung. This is a graphic breath-by-breath representation of the patient's airway resistance, static compliance, effort, tidal volume. It even displays the end-tidal CO2. As far as lung mechanics, though, the bronchial tree indicates airway resistance. So if airway resistance increases, you can see the bronchial tree will get dark and narrowed, like an inflamed look. And for static compliance, the graphic changes the shape of the lungs. You can see the blue outline behind there. That's what the lungs would look like if we had normal static compliance. But the lower the compliance, the more angular the lungs become. Here we have a demo lung which has very low compliance, so the lung displays a very boxy shape. The dynamic lung will also display a diaphragm indicating patient trigger. And the larger the tidal volume in relation to the ideal body weight, the larger the lungs will inflate breath by breath. Okay, let's tap the screen, and now we see the event status panel here. This is a graphic representation of various weaning parameters. Each parameter displays a timer, so we know how long the patient's been on minimal vent support. Once all the timers reach the wean zone, a large timer will display showing how long the patient's been on an SPT. Let's move on to the next tab over. This is called loops. We have our choice of different loops. Let's display a pressure volume loop, pressure flow loop. Sorry. Next tab over, trends. The ventilator will actually trend every monitored parameter for up to 72 hours. To display a trend, select the trend time. Let's just go with a 1 hour here, confirm, and we see the trend panel. To scroll back, to examine the trend, this is the screen freeze button. If I activate that, I can scroll back and examine the trends for the past hour. Wherever the cursor is pointing, the time is displayed here, and the pressure or whatever monitor parameter I'm looking at is displayed right there. And notice this button also freezes the waveforms, so I can examine a pressure or flow waveform if I'd like. Okay, let's put the ventilator in standby. Press once, activate standby.